Okay, so here's a walkthrough of the available units search and filter, which is essentially a URL hack that we built in Experience Cloud for all Chicago. So, as I put in the blog post, the whole purpose of this was to provide a dynamic search result of units that can be selected by a case manager for a client. And it needs to be in real time and dynamic so that if they introduce a characteristic like west side of Chicago or south side of Chicago, and that suddenly limits all of the units and removes them from view, they would be able to know, okay, so I should think about looking somewhere else, as opposed to piling an entire list of criteria under 1,000 for rent, two-bedroom, with an elevator and on the south side. You wouldn't necessarily know which of those four criteria were causing you to come up with zero results. So that real-time response we sort of internally came to refer to as Zappos functionality. It's essentially an e-commerce site searching, and there's not really a good option out of the box within Experience Cloud that also allows you to choose which records you want to see, um, and still have others that are sort of hidden. So basically, to preset those filters. And the reason that's important for all Chicago is because when they were putting this all together, there are certain units that they want to have visible in the rapid rehousing hive, that are essentially on hold or selected by a participant. And the case manager is still working with that participant and needs to look at them, but other folks should not be able to find them in the search because they're essentially not on the table to be selected by them. So here is the Hive, and what I will show you is the way that we used the global search results with a parameter essentially introduced, and some automation behind the scenes to keep that parameter up to date. But that's what we decided in lieu of using essentially a list view, which has not the greatest UX for a non-Salesforce user, as well as it limits you to whatever those parameters are unless you try to teach them how to filter. We also did not want to go the full coding route because we wanted this to be very admin friendly, and so we built this hack. So here is the solution. So available units search and filter is a button. This is a menu within Experience Cloud, and when I click on it, you'll see that it takes me to the global search page and automatically introduces the word selectable. So you'll see on here that selectable is not included in any of these visible um, fields. That is fine, but it is only showing those units that have been identified as selectable. And so, in order to do that, what we essentially did was we went over here and created a helper field. And this is super selectable, super admin friendly. So, any of this stuff, basically, we said if the pick val of this and it's not on hold, it's also ready to show to NAMI. Basically, if that set of criteria is set, go ahead and mark it as selectable. If not, make it unavailable. And because that will sometimes change. So, for example, something is put on hold. If it's selected, it is no longer available. All of those things change in real time at the AME. And so we have, and I actually don't have it up right now, we have a flow that essentially anytime there's a change on that field, or the field is the unit is selected as is put into the system as new, you can go ahead and update that field. So that keeps this text field completely in sync with the underlying characteristics and criteria. So with that in mind, then when you put in selectable as your criteria, it looks at all of these units, and I've set it up so that it drops you directly onto unit because unit is the first object within the global search results. It takes you here and then immediately looks for anything with a text string of selectable. So that hidden field that is not on this layout drives that filtering of these units rather than using a sharing set or some sort of standard security lockdown, because those units still have to be visible. We just don't want them in this part of the search. So the next thing that we did to make this easy is these refine by characteristics. So if I were to say, I want the west side, you suddenly see that I do that one filter and I drop to just a single unit here. Or I go to, let's do the south side, and you see that I have a ton of units. I have more than 50 of them. So that dynamic filtering, that's all an out of the box functionality within Experience Cloud. And these fields are essentially driven by the search layout. And so the three different profiles that we have for the users of the Hive have this exact set of fields listed in their search layout, which means if a particular field that's maybe new, maybe is needing to be included in that, needs to be added, all the admin has to do is add that field in here, and it will suddenly appear here in this refine by. Now, that list gets pretty long. There's probably some version of a limit on there, but for the sake of what's going on with their use case, they were really fine with the 6 or 7 different fields that are all included here. The last thing that I will show you is this particular tile menu. Right here is this available search and filter. What you can see is that what we've essentially done is we've done a site page, and you can do all of these different things. You could use a URL, but we're essentially using a site page as an internal URL hack. And so site page, the page we want is search, and then that URL. So you can replace the parameter with something. So for example, the example on here is record ID. Here's where we just dropped in selectable. So if you wanted to use something else, like say elevator or something like that, you could go ahead and populate that in here. But we, for the purpose of this, went ahead and used selectable. That gives us exactly what we're looking for and gives All Chicago and their case managers a really simple, easy way to do that dynamic searching, especially when they're sitting with the client directly in front of them.